Good evening. It's been a remarkable day in the history of Rangers Football Club and indeed the whole Scottish game. Control of Scotland's biggest and richest club has passed from the Lawrence dynasty, who've held power at Ibrox for decades, to a new owner. He's 37-year-old David Murray, a self-made multi-millionaire who now finds himself in charge of Scotland's footballing millionaires. Previously, he'd tried to buy control of Ayr United Football Club. His partner in the Ibrox takeover is Rangers manager GRAEME Souness, who now owns 10% of the club and immediately becomes a director. It's been a day of high drama in Glasgow. This morning, rumours began to circulate that a sensational announcement was imminent on the sale of the club. By lunchtime, Ibrox Stadium was under siege as reporters learned that talks were underway inside. Then early this afternoon, confirmation that the deal was done. In the studio tonight to discuss today's news are Alex Cameron of the Daily Record, one of Scotland's most distinguished sports journalists, and financial analyst Robert Miller-Bakewell of stockbrokers County NatWest Wood Mac. We'll be hearing their analysis later, but we start with today's dramatic chain of events at Ibrox. It was the day the Rangers' power game moved from the pitch to the boardroom. The media gathered at the front door of Ibrox Stadium, eager to record another major announcement. From the club that brought GRAEME Souness back from Italy and creamed off some of the biggest stars in the British game, installing them at Ibrox, what new drama was about to unfold? Enter Mr. Souness and David Murray, owner of Murray International Holdings, a businessman with the Midas touch and a close friend of the Rangers manager.
GRAEME and I have been working on it about 4 or 6 weeks, and we're delighted that it's come to maturity late last night.
What are your plans for Rangers Football Club?
To carry on the fine work that's already been started by the Lawrence Group, build on that and hopefully retain the club in the future to be #1 football club in Scotland.
What is the background to the sale by Lawrence Marlborough?
Well, it's a personal decision that he's made, that he finds it difficult to manage a club from 6,000 miles away, so at the end of the day he's made this decision.
What sort of changes would you envisage making?
There'll be no major sweeping changes, just carrying on as I said before.
How ambitious are you for the club?
Well, if anybody knows me in business, it may reflect into the club. I'm very ambitious.
Do you have a message for Ayr United?
I hope we draw them in the Scottish Cup and we'll welcome them at Ibrox.
I've been asked to go on the board of Glasgow Rangers Football Club. For me, it's a tremendous honour. It's something I didn't expect.
How does it affect your role as manager?
Well, first and foremost, I'm the manager. The fellow directors will surely understand that most of my time is with the players, or should be spent with the players, and they will understand that, and that's the way they would want it. So really, I'll be a bit more time consuming, but no real changes as far as the manager's job.
But you'll obviously now have a bigger say in the wider affairs of the club.
Yes, the club has been run very successfully in the last 2.5 years. We will not be making any drastic changes. Mr. Murray has his own ideas, and I'm sure we'll implement them, but there's not going to be anything drastic immediately.
How will it affect the running of the club from the point of view of money to spend on new players?
Well, I'll be working within a budget, as I always have. Our supporters have turned out and supported us in tremendous numbers, which has enabled us to go out and purchase new players, and hopefully they continue to do so. So really, I'll be working within the budget, as I always have been.
But you don't see this as a change of direction for the club?
Most certainly not. I've known Mr. Murray for the 2.5 years I've been back in Scotland. I've become friendly with him. I can guarantee this is a great day for the supporters, as well as Rangers Football Club. Mr. Marlborough, Mr. Holmes, have worked very hard in the 2.5 years they've been in charge, and it must be a sad day for Mr. Marlborough. But at the end of the day, I can assure you that Mr. Murray will work equally as hard as Mr. Marlborough has done, and the club, in my opinion, could not be going to a better person.
American-based Lawrence Marlborough is now out of the Ibrox team picture. Rangers chairman David Holmes is still in, despite his offer to resign.
Well, I'm the UK Managing Director of the Lawrence Group, and I'm chairman of Rangers PLC. The two of them are two entirely different entities, so there's no mix-up between the two.
How do you see things changing? It's being stressed that the plan for Rangers will not change, but there must surely be some alterations in the way things are run.
No, there'll be no changes as such. Obviously, we've got a new owner, as it were, and he'll have his own ideas. and it'll be up to us as a board to implement his ideas.
How do you feel today for Lawrence Marlborough?
Oh, very sad, because the Lawrence family go back with the Rangers a long way. But things move on, and progress is progress, and Mr. Marlborough wants to pay his attention to America, and so therefore he feels it's incumbent upon him to move this way and leave Rangers to someone else who's actually here and will have the hands on the till. The motive is to give Rangers another lift and to make it more exciting for the people who come and watch every week, and that's important. Everything we've done so far and everything Mr. Murray's doing right now is to make Rangers a greater club. That's important.
The people who go and watch reacted with some surprise as they found out their club had been sold.
The Rangers Football Club's majority shareholding has been sold in a £9 million deal by Lawrence Marlborough to Ayrshire businessman David Murray. It's a move which has shocked the football world.
I'm really surprised. I'm disappointed.
I think
that you'll find most fans will be disappointed. Nobody's ever heard of this chap Murray. I mean, who is this chap Murray? He's a Rangers. He's not a Rangers supporter, obviously. He's not got any connection.
No, I
with
understand he's standing in volleyball, etc. But
he tried to take over Ayr United Football Club, and he failed to take over Ayr United. And suddenly he's good enough to take over a club as vast as Rangers.
You don't.
Very much so. Yes, of course.
You don't buy and sell clubs
if this
like
chap
Rangers.
fails to take over Ayr United Football Club and about to take over Ayr United, and suddenly he's overall control on Rangers, of course you've got to cast doubts on the guy's ability.
You don't buy and sell clubs at the Rangers.
Not like that.
Not like that.
Nobody's ever heard of this chap.
No one comes
Lawrence
in and just
Marlborough's
says,
got a
"Oh,
long
they've been
history.
sold."
His family have got a long history of attachment with Rangers Football Club. This chap Murray, as far as I know, has got none.
Well, it's a surprise, first of all, yes, but if it's good for Rangers, well, it's okay by me. We belong to the Premier, club season ticket holders. But
Do you
it's
think
a
it will be
surprise.
good for Rangers?
Well, that'll has to be cut to see what happens. But it's a surprise. We can't even think about it at the moment.
No, we can't even really say it because we don't know what's going to happen. But as long as Rangers won, keep on winning, that's up there for me, no matter who's got them.
That reaction possibly sums it up best of all. Now, Alex Cameron of the Daily Record. Rangers today springing the perfect surprise.
Well, it was a great surprise. I don't think very many people knew about it at all, and because of the very speed of the operation, people are now looking under stones and trying to find things that possibly aren't there. They're trying to find reasons for this change that probably may not exist, that Lawrence Marlborough has deduced that after 3 years it was time for him to go and let someone else take over the reins. He's handed over to a very dynamic 37-year-old doer, a man who will really get things done. And I think the bottom line is this can only be good for the Rangers fans.
The name Lawrence has been linked with Rangers for a long time. Why should now be the right time to sell?
Well, Lawrence Marlborough has said today that he felt that after 3 years it was time to hand on the reins. Football is now a big commercial enterprise, a commercial business with escalating costs, all kinds of things that entrepreneurs have got to think about. And I think it's just time to hand on the baton, and this is what he's done. He's handed it on, in my opinion, to a very good man, a man who's already got very much a proven track record.
Were you surprised at the price?
Well, he has, in fact. Lawrence Marlborough has actually doubled his money, but yes, I was surprised that you could buy a football club of Rangers stature so cheaply.
Is it a deal that has possibly been engineered by GRAEME SOUNESS himself?
I would doubt it very much. I think obviously GRAEME SOUNESS would realise what was going on, and I think, by the way, the very fact that he himself has plunged £600,000 or thereabouts into Rangers Football Club shows the kind of confidence he's got, and I think that can be only a good thing. But I think possibly he knew the inside information, and as a chat with David Murray, who's a great personal friend of his, and over the last 4 weeks they've hatched out a plan, and we see the result of it today.
We heard there some of the supporters' concerns, obviously worried that this might be just a businessman's plaything to be tossed aside in a couple of years' time.
Well, you see, a few years ago you would have had a bloodless coup. Today we had one with no blood at all. You would have had, in the more diffuse shareholding that Rangers used to have, you would have 3 or 4 people all fighting for power, people with, say, 20,000 shares saying, I want to be the chairman. But we don't have that. The chairman continues, but the man who'll be very much in control is David Murray. And I think this is a sign of the times. I think football more and more is commercialised. The Corinthian spirit is completely gone. We must regard football as a business, and that's precisely what's happened today.
Alex, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Well, today's news shocked not only the football world, but also the Scottish business and financial community. Here now is our industrial correspondent, Alan Sonby.
Rangers' footballing success during the last few years has been matched by a determination to develop the club as a business, to get the most out of its unique position in the Scottish game. Rangers management grabbed what they saw as a sleeping giant and began to realise the huge potential for increasing its profile.
David Murray has taken control of one of Scotland's best-known businesses. In the latest accounts, Ibrox Stadium is valued at over £23 million. To pay £6 million for overall control seems like a steal. In the last financial year, £6.5 million came into the Ibrox coffers. A trading profit of nearly £1.5 million was wiped out by player buys, and the company made a loss of over £1 million, despite regularly filling the stadium. In the last 18 months alone, Rangers have splashed out over £4.5 million on transfer fees. Salaries are high at Ibrox. Manager GRAEME Souness earned around £110,000. Assistant manager Walter Smith, goalkeeper Chris Woods and captain Terry Butcher earned over £70,000. Rangers were not making a financial contribution to John Lawrence Construction, who own most of the shares Lawrence Marlborough sold today. There certainly seems to have been a dramatic change in the owner's thinking since it was revealed by GRAEME Souness in a telling interview when they clinched the Premier League title last year in Souness's first year in charge.
The chairman's always said the club belongs to the supporters. Any money that's made, any money that comes in through the turnstiles is going to be reinvested in players. He's not interested in a great deal of money amassing in the bank and earning tremendous amounts of interest. The only thing he's interested in is putting better players out there in blue jerseys, and we'll do that.
In the last few years, Chairman David Holmes, handpicked by Lawrence Marlborough to start a marketing revolution, has been changing the commercial face of the club. In 3 years, turnover grew from £1.8 million to 6.6. Non-football earnings now total around £2.25 million, with the success of initiatives like the Executive Suite, the Rangers Premier Club, Rangers News and Rangers International. The sponsorship deal with Scottish Brewers is worth £1.1 million over 3 years. The income from radio and TV royalties is dramatically increasing as Rangers negotiate to televise their own European ties to an Ibrox audience of 10,000. Rangers Pools, the separate company which raises cash for the club, now hands over more than £1 million.
What had to happen was it had to be slowed down, looked at, torn apart and then built up again. And to have done that in one season is absolutely incredible. It's more than I would have hoped for, it's more than anyone could have hoped for. But I'm a proud man, nevertheless.
In an interview with Scottish television in America earlier this year, Lawrence Marlborough talked about the future.
I would think there will have to be some looking at the situation as far as where we're going in 20 years or 40 years' time. Because all the investments you're making in particularly grounds, if you build a stadium, you don't build it for 3 or 4 years and then write it off. You build it for 30 or 40 years. So everyone's got to know roughly where we're all trying to get. Yeah. So there are some long-term objectives that I would think have to be agreed. And Scottish football is not going to face up to that at this time, but they will have to face up to it fairly soon. If they don't face up to it, then our club would say, well, what are the other alternatives?
Yeah, well, this seems to be something that the bigger English clubs like Everton and Liverpool are looking at as well. I mean, they're having a similar problem with their league and the way the thinking's going.
I don't think there's any game plan. All I would suggest is there's something going to happen. Our job is to have Rangers Football Club positioned that whichever way it goes, we have to be in hopefully the right place at the right time. And equipped with the right facilities, financial structure and everything else that you're going to have to exist, whichever way it goes.
Yeah. So was the whole point of your game plan for the club then, get the stadium right, get the right people in, both on the park and off the park, and then become the biggest club in Europe?
Well, I don't think being the biggest club in Europe means anything. All we have to do is be the best club for Rangers supporters. That's our objective.
With this success, the £6 million paid for a 69% stake seems remarkably low. Lawrence Marlborough, heir to the Lawrence family Rangers tradition, may well have been a forced seller to raise quick cash. Now living in America, he's investing heavily in property development in Nevada and building a new community called El Dorado near Carson City.
With me is Robert Miller-Bakewell, an analyst with stockbrokers County NatWest Woodmac. Robert, how do you value a football club?
Certainly not in the way you value a conventional company in terms of earnings per share or yield. You have to look at perhaps the intrinsic value that any football club has associated with its name, but particularly also at the fixed assets and at the players. The players obviously have a value which could be realised in the transfer market. However, older players are depreciating assets. If you buy a defender in his late 20s and pay $500,000 for him, you may well have to write that off over 5 years before he reaches retirement.
It might seem surprising to a lot of viewers tonight that $6 million could it be fair value for a club the size of Rangers?
I think you have to look at the price per share which is being paid, which is £20, which is the same as the price which you could have bought, should they have been available, shares in Rangers through a stockbroker. There isn't actually a formal market, it's match bargains, but £20 is the value of the shares today in the market.
A lot of people have said to me, financial analysts, that it looks cheap, that it looks as though it's a fire sale. You would go along with that?
It's interesting to note that no premium has been paid over the existing share price in the market in order to gain control. And traditionally, particularly in an agreed bid to gain control of a company, you pay quite a substantial premium, perhaps around a third or even more to the existing share price. So one could have expected a price closer to £30 per share, perhaps.
An agreed bid, is this kind of sale unusual, normal?
It's much more common amongst private companies. In fact, it's very rare to have a hostile bid for a private company.
Do you think that the deal was quickly arranged, and does that tell us something?
The deal, certainly in terms of the way it's referred to in the press release, does appear to have been put together fairly quickly. There is specific reference to the fact that the process of due diligence hasn't been completed, and normally in a transaction between two private companies that will be completed before any agreement was entered into. So it does look as though it's been put together fairly quickly.
Lawrence Marlborough is a hard-headed businessman, hardly made of sugar candy, but will it be a wrench to give up Rangers?
He's obviously had to look very carefully at his wide range of interests, and it may well be that he wants to concentrate, as has been implied, on his American construction interests, and he needs the money to do that.
There have been several financial transactions involving English clubs. Is this different?
I think it's different in the sense that it's an agreed bid rather than a hostile approach. It has been the case with one or two of the recent deals with English clubs. I think it's also worth noting that it is a deal where the management is staying in place in the form of the chairman.
How much of the success is due to David Holmes, and how well will he work with the new chairman?
Well, he must take a lot of the credit for the revival in the playing and commercial fortunes of Rangers over the last few years, and obviously Lawrence Marlborough is being able to sell the company at the peak of its earnings, perhaps.
Robert Miller-Bakewell will come back to you later in the programme. Much of today's interest has focused obviously on the man who now finds himself the new owner of Rangers. David Murray is not exactly a household name, but he's a man very highly respected in the business circles.
The new owner is one of the most successful self-made businessmen in Scotland. His achievements are even more remarkable, considering David Murray lost both legs in a car accident shortly after founding Murray Metals. To build up a £60 million stock-holding business when everyone else was losing a fortune during a troubled period in the industry shows his mettle.
How did you feel when you realised that you'd lost your legs?
I don't think I've ever really thought about it, because I've had so much to do. I'm very fortunate. I had a lot waiting for me. I had a family, a business, a lot of good friends, and they helped me pull through.
Murray International Holdings has diversified into property development and is one of the contenders to build an Edinburgh Conference Centre. The commercial community has enormous confidence in his ability. One of Scotland's best-known financial figures, Peter Stevenson, has backed him in many deals.
And I suppose it's even conceivable, it's rather a fanciful suggestion, that he has the capacity. Give him a few more years, he's only 31 now, project him up to the age of 40, and he could be running a very large enterprise and possibly even a nationalised industry.
David Murray's most striking sporting success to date has been with the Livingston-based Murray International basketball team, which repeatedly won the Scottish Association Championship. He puts £150,000 per annum into running the team, but football has been a greater passion. His greatest disappointment before his personal tragedy was to be turned down for a trial as a midfield player with Ayr United. One of his greatest friends is GRAEME Souness, with whom he regularly plays snooker, and no doubt tipped him off Rangers were up for sale. A year ago, David Murray said the only way for anyone wanting to be successful in sport in the future is for them to be associated with business and have that underwrite the cost of improving the strength of their teams. An accomplished marketing man, he's almost certain to have exciting plans for Rangers. The business community believes a superb operator is taking over.
Alex Cameron, this new business partnership at the top at Ibrox, is there going to be a bottomless barrel of cash for new players?
I think very definitely not. I think David Murray and GRAEME SOUNESS are both very good businessmen. Mr. Murray talked today of having a budget which he said wouldn't be less than the one, as far as players are concerned, than exists at the moment. But I think there'll be, if they do buy players, it'll be very carefully done. There'll be no wild splashing out. I think you'll see possibly some tightening up and some perhaps even more business methods being introduced. But I think an important point to remember is that the buyers are not taking over some dying concern. They're taking over a club who in the last 2.5 years have won the league championship and 3 other major trophies. They're not taking over something that's dying on its feet. And I think the Lawrence Marlborough will finish up not with £20 but with £25 per share. Admittedly, it's still a cheap buy for Mr. Murray and Mr. Souness.
Both are men in their mid-30s. This is clearly a partnership which could go on for some time.
Yes, well, I think everybody envisaged or is hopeful, certainly Rangers fans and the new management at Ibrox, that one day, fairly soon, they could win the European Cup. But Mr. Murray went out of his way today to say, look, don't let's start talking of European Cups. My concern is winning next Saturday. He's obviously thought it out very carefully, and he's not sort of doing any pie in the sky kind of thinking.
Robert, do you see Rangers having money to spend in the future, more money to spend, or do you see them selling for survival?
I think it'll take a little time to see how the new ownership settle in. I think that it's quite clear that David Murray has a very healthy and vibrant business enterprise in steel stock holding and property interests, and therefore he's certainly in a position to put more money into the company. I hope and expect that he's unlikely to follow the route of one or two acquirers of football companies in the English League, where they have undertaken forced sales of players to fund the acquisitions of the clubs themselves, and I don't think that's going to happen here, no.
I put this question to Alex. Do you see this as possibly David Murray's new plaything?
I don't think David Murray is the kind of businessman who gets involved in playthings. He certainly has hobbies and interests, and his commitment to the basketball team is clearly evidence of that. But he is first and foremost a businessman with very successful interests, and he will obviously run this club in parallel with those interests, and he will give it the same professional treatment as he gives his business interests.
Alex, is David Holmes on what might be called a short-term contract?
Very difficult to say, but certainly there was no indication of that today. David Holmes is retained firmly as the chairman. Obviously, all this will unfold, you know, as the new management settle and see how things are going.
What happens if the results turn sour? Will GRAEME SOUNESS have to sack himself?
Well, Graham actually is always talking about being sacked. He mentioned it again today, but clearly with a £600,000 investment, there's very little chance of this. But he did say, if I ever need to be sacked, I'll know when to go and I'll beat the pistol.
Let's round it off with brief comments from you both on the way ahead for Rangers. Robert, first, do you see a bright business future for Rangers?
I certainly think that we're going to see some further innovative introductions in terms of how the club markets itself and develops its interests, particularly in terms of promoting the wider interests of the club, because that is important in terms of its financial viability. You cannot run a football club purely on the gate receipts.
And Alex, from a football point of view?
Well, I think a very important thing that control of Rangers Football Club is staying in Scotland. It could have gone elsewhere, perhaps, because there may well be white knights that we don't know about waiting to pounce. But I think the fact that as some other businesses, the control of them is passing out of Scotland, at least Rangers Football Club is staying here. And I do think, yes, the club will have a bright future. Let's face it, they did rejuvenate the whole scene 2.5 years ago. And I think they will continue to be a very, very bright spark indeed. And clearly, although they're not saying it at this stage, but clearly GRAEME SOUNESS's main objective is to win the European Cup. And I think, with a little patience, I think he'll achieve this.
Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight. Well, it won't surprise you to know that the subject we've been tackling tonight occupies a fair few column inches of tomorrow morning's papers. A couple of examples coming up. Firstly, in the Sun newspaper, Souness puts up £600,000 in takeover, and inside referred to as Mr. Moneybags, and penned by the fair hand of Alex Cameron, the new firm, Director Souness, and the man who bought Rangers. That's it from us. A very good evening to you.